Visual Studio 2022, I'm going to create a new project. And my project here will be a C# all-platform web. You scroll down, you'll find Blazor WebAssembly app. Remember, there's WebAssembly and there's also Blazor server. And the WebAssembly will run aside from being connected to the internet because all the logic is built into the browser window, whereas the server will require constant access to the cloud. So we're going to create a WebAssembly app. I'm going to click Next. I'm just going to call Blazor app demo. I'll do demo 2. Decide where I want to have that located. And then I'll click Next. I'm going to use .NET 6. We'll configure it for HTTPS. I'm going to click Create. We'll then build our web project, our WebAssembly project for us. Now, in essence, the WebAssembly is kind of like a website. There can be multiple pages. In fact, in the template, there are multiple pages. And then there is also code that is shared. In working with Blazor, we need to have basic HTML and CSS skills. Some of you have that, some of you don't. And so I'll try to explain a little bit of how websites work in terms of HTML and CSS. And when we get to the project, if you don't have that experience, you can just follow along with what I do. So in our Solution Explorer, we have several folders, one of which is called www.root. That contains something called CSS, which is Cascading Style Sheets. And inside that CSS, we have an app.css. I'm going to open that up. And this determines our colors and our fonts and sizes of things based on links to the CSS. And it might seem a little cryptic, and that's okay. This will make a little more sense as we go a little further in. Then we have a sample data folder. Inside of that is an index.html as well as some other files. So the index.html is where we would start with our WebAssembly project in terms of loading into the browser. I'm going to roll that back up. Let's take a look at this pages folder, and we have 3 pages here: counter.razor, fetchdata.razor, and index.razor. Now, for those coming from a web background, you'd be expecting here a counter.html and a fetchdata.html and an index.html most likely. Razor is Microsoft's page model for the ASP.NET and the Blazor frameworks. The Razor pages contain HTML, Razor components, and C# functionality that would be very similar to what you would have with JavaScript in an HTML file. So these are our 3 pages. That'll make sense as we run this in a minute. So counter, fetch, and index. So here we're going to have a page title of index. We have it's going to say hello world. This H1 is a headline text tag. Now in HTML we have tags that define properties or sizes, and so this is H1 and then there's the /H1. So it's an opening tag and a closing tag. We have some text of welcome to your new app, and then we have a survey prompt, which is going to be another object with a title of how is Blazor working for you. Then we have some shared code, shared folder. Here we have a main layout Razor. So this will be our main layout. It's going to include links to a menu, and it has its own CSS. Then we have, also in our shared, we have a nav menu Razor. This is going to be the menu we'll see on the left-hand side. So we're going to see here some links to basically our index, our counter, and our fetch. And it also has Cascading Style Sheet attached to it. Let me just run this. So there's a link here for Blazor app demo 2, and we can choose here how we want to run this. We're going to run this in our web browser. I'm using Microsoft Edge, but you could use Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox. And for those who have taken the .NET MAUI class from me, you'll see a lot of similarities between this and creating apps in .NET MAUI, where we're using XAML code rather than Razor pages, but then functionality as well within their page. It's done in C#. So So it's building the file as a local host file. So it's using my computer as if it's the server. And here's our page that's developed. So we have our home page, our counter page, and our fetch data page. Now remember, those were the pages we had over here: counter, fetch data, and then index is really our home. And I can go to these different pages from the menu. There's our counter. Now the counter has some C# functionality built in. I can click on the Click Me button, and it's going to do a current count. Very similar to the boilerplate template we see in .NET MAUI. The fetch data is simply bringing in some sample data as far as a weather forecast. Now notice that this is a nice little gradient going kind of from a blue to a purple here in the menu. I'm going to go back into Visual Studio. In the main layout.razor.css cascading style sheet, we have a style here for .sidebar, and this is setting the gradient that we see in that menu on the left-hand side. Currently, we're going from a blue down to a purple, and so here's that blue color as an RGB. Now, if we simply change the red value, let's make it 255, and I'm going to save that CSS file, go back to our web app, and now it's going from a red to a purple. If I want to make that final gradient at the bottom more of a yellow, well, we could change this to FF47. Again, I'm going to save my layout, and now you can see it's going from red to yellow. We also have a top bar up here at the top that's a light gray, and maybe I want to make that more of a dark blue. That's defined here in this .top row style. And let's just do a maybe a 3333 F7. Again, I'm going to save that file. And now I've got a bright blue top row. So that's how we can change how items are displayed using cascading style sheets. And usually we're affecting things like colors and fonts and sizes of various items. The content here that we see, hello world, welcome to your new app, is coming from our pages. In this particular case, the index.razor page. I'm going to jump over to that page, and we can see that content here. We have our index title, hello world, welcome to your new app, and then a survey with the title of how is Blazor working for you, and that's coming from a whole nother page. Let's change this hello world to hello Blazor students. And then there's also the survey prompt.razor. We'll open that up. And so here is our survey prompt. Please take our, and then we have our brief survey with a link that goes to a survey at Microsoft, and tell us what you think. Please take our wonderful brief survey. So making a little modification there. I'm going to go to the File menu and just simply choose Save All. Now, because we're changing the HTML code rather than just the cascading style sheets, I'm going to stop my app and run it again. And now the page says, hello Blazor students, and we get, please take our wonderful brief survey. Now remember, this gray box here isn't coming from index.razor, it's coming from our survey prompt.razor file. So we're embedding that razor file into our index.razor file, the contents of that in. I can also change the colors, I can change the spacing of these items, all kinds of things we can do here. But this gives you an idea of how a Blazor app is laid out in terms of HTML and in terms of cascading style sheets. Let's look at one more thing. That's our counter page. I'm going to go there, and you'll see in our counter page where we have an @code, and we have some kind of standard C# in which we're creating a variable, integer variable called current count, setting it to 0, and then a method here, increment count, and we're simply adding to that count by current count plus plus. Our button here above that says click me, has an event here of on click, and it's calling increment count method. So that's how we can add some capabilities here, some functionality using C# instead of JavaScript in our Razor app pages. In the next video, we'll jump in and we'll create a new app with a little game. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the C# Xamarin Programming Cohort playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.